In 1935, Hollywood was a battlefield where studios fought tooth and nail for dominance, and two unlikely warriors were about to forge an alliance that would reshape the entertainment industry forever. William Fox, a Hungarian immigrant who had built Fox Film Corporation from a single nickel theater in Brooklyn, was watching his empire crumble under the weight of financial ruin and personal scandal. Meanwhile, Darryl Zanuck, a brash young executive who had just walked away from Warner Brothers after a heated dispute over salary cuts, was plotting his comeback with financial backing from Joseph Schenck and the formation of 20th Century Pictures. What happened next would create one of Hollywood's most enduring powerhouses, a studio that would dominate the silver screen for over 8 decades before falling to Disney's historic $71 billion acquisition in 2019. The merger between Fox Film Corporation and 20th Century Pictures in May 1935 wasn't born from friendship or shared vision, but from desperation and ambition colliding at the perfect moment. Fox Film Corporation, founded in 1915, was hemorrhaging money after William Fox's disastrous attempts to acquire MGM and his involvement in a stock manipulation scandal that left him bankrupt and facing federal charges. The company that had once been valued at over $300 million was now teetering on the edge of collapse, its assets frozen and its future uncertain. Enter Darryl Zanuck, the 28-year-old former head of production at Warner Brothers, who had already proven his golden touch by producing hits like The Jazz Singer and 42nd Street. Zanuck's newly formed 20th Century Pictures had secured $12 million in funding from United Artists founders Joseph Schenck and the banking house of Lehman Brothers, giving him the capital needed to acquire Fox's struggling operation. The merger created 20th Century Fox, with Zanuck as vice president in charge of production and Joseph Schenck as president, instantly transforming the combined entity into one of Hollywood's major studios with over 1,500 employees and a sprawling lot in West Los Angeles. Zanuck wasted no time establishing 20th Century Fox as a creative and commercial force, implementing a production philosophy that would define the studio for generations. Unlike other studios that relied heavily on formula pictures and star vehicles, Zanuck championed what he called important entertainment, films that combined commercial appeal with social significance and production values that set new industry standards. His first major triumph came with The Grapes of Wrath in 1940, John Ford's adaptation of John Steinbeck's controversial novel about Depression-era migrant workers, which earned 7 Oscar nominations and proved that audiences would embrace serious subject matter when expertly crafted. Zanuck's keen eye for talent transformed unknowns into superstars, discovering and developing icons like Tyrone Power, who became the studio's leading man throughout the 1930s and 1940s, and Betty Grable, whose pinup photos became synonymous with World War II and whose films generated over $100 million in revenue during the 1940s alone. The studio's commitment to technical innovation also set it apart, as Fox became the first major studio to fully embrace Technicolor, producing lavish musicals and dramas that showcased the technology's potential, while competitors were still shooting primarily in black and white. The 1940s marked 20th Century Fox's golden age, as the studio produced an unprecedented string of classics that would define American cinema for decades. Zanuck's masterpiece, How Green Was My Valley, not only won the Academy Award for Best Picture in 1941, beating out Citizen Kane, but also established the studio's reputation for prestige productions that could compete with MGM's glossy offerings and Warner Brothers' gritty dramas. The decade saw Fox revolutionize the musical genre with State Fair and Centennial Summer, while simultaneously pioneering the psychological thriller with Laura, starring Gene Tierney, which became both a critical and commercial sensation that influenced film noir for years to come. Fox's war films, including A Wing and a Prayer and The Purple Heart, captured the American spirit during World War II while generating massive box office returns that helped fund the studio's expansion into international markets. By 1945, 20th Century Fox was operating over 400 theaters worldwide and had become the second largest studio in Hollywood, trailing only MGM in annual revenue and surpassing even Paramount in terms of global reach and influence. The post-war era brought both triumph and crisis as 20th Century Fox navigated the seismic shifts that would reshape Hollywood forever. The 1948 Paramount Decree, which forced studios to divest their theater chains, hit Fox particularly hard since the company owned over 500 theaters that generated nearly 40% of its annual revenue.
Zanuck's response was characteristically bold. He doubled down on spectacle and innovation, pioneering CinemaScope technology in 1953 with The Robe, starring Richard Burton, which became the year's highest-grossing film and proved that widescreen format could lure audiences away from television and back to movie theaters. The success of CinemaScope generated over $50 million in licensing fees alone as other studios rushed to adopt the technology, while Fox's own CinemaScope productions, including How to Marry a Millionaire with Marilyn Monroe and The King and I with Yul Brynner, dominated the box office throughout the 1950s. Monroe herself became Fox's most valuable asset during this period, with her films generating over $200 million in revenue despite her notoriously difficult behavior and contractual disputes that often delayed production and inflated budgets. The 1960s brought 20th Century Fox to the brink of bankruptcy with Cleopatra, the most expensive film ever made at that time, with a budget that ballooned from $5 million to $44 million due to Elizabeth Taylor's health problems, location changes, and script rewrites that stretched production over 4 years. The film's production nearly destroyed the studio, forcing Fox to sell off 68 acres of its backlot to developers, land that would eventually become Century City, one of Los Angeles' most valuable commercial districts worth billions of dollars today. Zanuck, who had left the studio in 1956 to become an independent producer, returned as president in 1962 to save the company from collapse, implementing draconian cost-cutting measures and refocusing on commercial entertainment rather than prestige projects. His gamble paid off spectacularly with The Sound of Music in 1965, which cost $8 million to produce and generated over $286 million worldwide, becoming the highest-grossing film in Fox's history to that point and single-handedly restoring the studio's financial health. The 1970s and 1980s established 20th Century Fox as the king of blockbuster entertainment under the leadership of Alan Ladd Jr., who greenlit Star Wars after every other major studio had passed on George Lucas's space opera. The 1977 film made for $11 million, generated over $775 million worldwide, and launched a franchise that would become Fox's most valuable property, generating billions in revenue from sequels, merchandise, and licensing deals over 4 decades. Ladd's successor, Sherry Lansing, became Hollywood's first female studio head in 1980 and continued Fox's blockbuster strategy with films like Romancing the Stone and Big, while also developing the studio's television division, which would become equally important with hits like which ran for 11 seasons and generated over $1 billion in syndication revenue. The decade also saw Fox embrace the emerging home video market more aggressively than its competitors, with the studio's video division generating over $300 million annually by 1985 and providing crucial revenue streams that funded larger theatrical productions.
The arrival of Rupert Murdoch in 1985 transformed 20th Century Fox from a traditional Hollywood studio into a global media empire that would challenge the established broadcast networks and pioneer new forms of entertainment distribution. Murdoch's acquisition of the studio for $575 million was part of his larger strategy to build a worldwide media conglomerate, and he immediately began leveraging Fox's content library and production capabilities to launch the Fox Broadcasting Company in 1986. Breaking the decades-long monopoly held by ABC, CBS, and NBC. The network's early programming strategy focused on counter-programming against the established networks, launching irreverent hits like Married with Children, The Simpsons, and The X-Files that attracted younger demographics and generated billions in advertising revenue while shocking traditional broadcasters with their edgy content. Fox's film division continued to thrive under Murdoch's ownership, producing massive hits like Home Alone, which generated $476 million worldwide on a budget of $18 million, and Titanic, which cost $200 million to produce but became the highest-grossing film in history with over $2 billion in worldwide revenue. The new millennium saw 20th Century Fox evolve into a diversified entertainment conglomerate that dominated multiple platforms and genres while facing unprecedented challenges from digital disruption and changing consumer habits. The studio's early embrace of digital technology paid dividends with groundbreaking films like X-Men, which launched in 2000 and created a superhero franchise that generated over $6 billion worldwide across 13 films over 2 decades, proving that comic book properties could sustain long-term cinematic universes when properly managed. Fox's television division reached new heights with American Idol, which became the most watched show in America for 8 consecutive seasons and generated over $2 billion in advertising revenue while revolutionizing reality television and audience participation through voting mechanisms. The studio also pioneered new distribution models with its international expansion, becoming the first major Hollywood studio to establish production facilities in China, India, and other emerging markets that would become crucial revenue sources as domestic box office growth slowed. However, the rise of streaming services and cord cutting began to erode traditional revenue streams, with Fox's television syndication business declining by 30% between 2010 and 2018, as audiences migrated to Netflix, Amazon Prime, and other digital platforms that bypass traditional broadcast and cable networks. The Disney acquisition of 21st Century Fox's entertainment assets for $71 billion in 2019 marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter in entertainment history, as one of Hollywood's most storied studios became part of the world's largest media conglomerate. The deal, which took over 2 years to complete due to regulatory scrutiny and a competing bid from Comcast, gave Disney control of Fox's film and television production studios, its international television businesses, and crucially, the X-Men and Fantastic Four film rights that allowed Disney to integrate these characters into its Marvel Cinematic Universe. The merger created unprecedented consolidation in the entertainment industry, with Disney now controlling over 40% of the domestic box office through its ownership of Marvel, Lucasfilm, Pixar, and the former Fox properties, raising concerns about competition and creative diversity that continue to reverberate through Hollywood today. For 20th Century Fox, the acquisition represented both an ending and a transformation. As the studio that had survived the Great Depression, World War II, the collapse of the studio system, and the digital revolution finally succumbed to the inexorable logic of scale and integration that defines modern media. The Fox legacy lives on through Disney's stewardship of its iconic properties and the thousands of films and television shows that continue to entertain audiences worldwide, a testament to the vision of Darryl Zanuck and the countless creative professionals who built one of entertainment history's most enduring empires, proving that sometimes the greatest success stories are those that know when to write their final chapter on their own terms.